His own brother stole his fiancée and his ranch, ruthlessly deceiving them both. Jed, driven by envy and greed, shattered the lives of those closest to him. But fate, thankfully, had a unique hand to play for Elijah Thorne, one that turned everything on its head. Prepared to discover how justice, forging its path through pain and betrayal, ultimately prevailed, and evil got what it deserved. Montana, 1878. The dry, dusty wind sweeping across the Montana plains brought no relief to Elijah Thorne, only a bitter taste of injustice on his tongue. His strong, calloused hands, accustomed to the grueling labor of the ranch, clutched a thin sheet of paper. It was a telegram. The words printed in stark ink danced before his eyes, but their meaning was crystal clear and utterly ruthless. Your fiancée, Sarah May, married your brother Jed. Forget returning. How could this be? Elijah's heart skipped a beat, then pounded in a furious rhythm, beating a drum of pure, unbridled anger in his chest. Jed, his own younger brother, the one he'd trusted more than anyone else in the world, the one he'd left to look after the family ranch in his dream while he served in the cavalry, defending the country's interests. A betrayal of such magnitude felt like a knife in the back, a searing blade plunged straight into his heart. He had always been Jed's support, protected him, shared his last dime, and now this was his reward. Elijah, always straightforward and honest, couldn't fathom the depths of such treachery. What could have driven Jed to something like this? Slowly, dark suspicions began to form in Elijah's mind. Jed had always envied his successes, his good fortune, and of course, Sarah's land. A parcel adjacent to the Thorne Ranch, it was a prime piece, capable of bringing considerable wealth. The craving for easy money, compounded by long-standing envy, that was it, the antagonist's repulsive motivation. The thought that his own brother could stoop so low to seize someone else's property and destroy someone else's happiness caused unbearable pain. Sarah, his Sarah. They had dreamed of a future, shared secrets under the vast Montana sky, exchanged tender letters filled with hopes for a swift wedding. Every word from the telegram burned like a brand. Conflict erupted instantly, bright and merciless, like dry brush catching a random spark. Anger, pain, disbelief. Every beat of his heart resonated with a dull, throbbing ache of betrayal, and his mind already conjured images of inevitable, furious retribution. Elijah, as if possessed, spurred his horse back towards the Thorne Ranch. Each hoofbeat on the dry earth echoed in his chest, amplifying the storm raging within him. He pictured bursting into the house, grabbing Jed by the collar, demanding an explanation, shaking every lie out of him. He expected to find his brother, ready for a furious clash, for shouts, for desperate excuses, but instead he was met only by silence and swirling clouds of dust, lifted by the wind. The ranch was deserted. The gates, which his father had built with such love, hung from a single hinge, broken and abandoned. On them, askew, dangled a rusted sign with faded letters, "Sold." This was not merely surprise, it was a cold, penetrating shock. His home, his legacy, sold by Jed. As if in a dream, Elijah dismounted and walked to the old saloon in town, the place where one could always catch up on the latest news and rumors. Old John, the saloon keeper, a man Elijah had known since childhood, cast his eyes down when Elijah entered. His raspy voice, like the grinding of gravel, shattered the silence. "She didn't want it, son. Jed tricked her, told her you were dead. Then he threatened her family. She was forced to marry him to save her loved ones." John's words crashed down on Elijah like an avalanche. The fury that had been boiling in his veins suddenly evaporated, leaving behind only a desolate, piercing pain. Pain from realizing the sheer magnitude of Jed's depravity. He hadn't just betrayed his brother. He had ruined the life of an innocent woman Elijah loved. He pictured Sarah, her bright eyes once full of life, now likely dulled by sorrow. He imagined her desperation, her forced submission, as she agreed to that sham marriage to protect those she loved. Each breath was a struggle. His chest felt squeezed as if by an invisible vice. This was not merely the loss of a fiancée or a ranch. It was the complete, brutal annihilation of everything he believed in, everything that gave his life meaning. In that moment, Elijah understood that his brother had not simply committed a wrong. He had crossed a line from which there was no turning back. Elijah immediately set out to find Sarah, his heart clenching with dread at the thought of what he might find there. He found her in a small, dilapidated shack on the very outskirts of town. She was but a shadow of the Sarah he remembered, gaunt, pale, and her once radiant eyes were now dull, like two burned-out stars. The sight of her caused a pang of anguish in his chest. Carefully, word by word, he told her everything. He recounted how Jed had deceived him, how he'd sold the ranch, how he'd disappeared. As the full truth unfolded, a flicker of her old fire ignited in her dulled eyes, bright and alive, only to immediately extinguish under the weight of a deep, all-consuming hatred for Jed. "He took everything, Elijah," she whispered, her voice tinged not only with pain but with a profound disappointment that sent shivers down my spine. "My land, my name, my future. I don't even know where he is now." Her words, full of despair and bitterness, only strengthened Elijah's resolve to find Jed and make him pay for what he'd done. And then a shocking twist occurred, one that changed everything. Amidst the pile of old papers left in Jed's abandoned office at the ranch, Elijah discovered an old promissory note. It was signed by Jed, but the handwriting on it was jarringly familiar. It was the hand of Samuel Sly Smith, the local moneylender. Smith was well known throughout the county as a man who orchestrated the dirtiest and most unscrupulous dealings. His name was synonymous with deceit and profit at any cost. As if a switch had been flipped, all the pieces of the puzzle clicked into place. Jed was not just a betrayer, he was merely a pawn in a larger game, a puppet in the hands of a far more cunning and dangerous player. Behind this meticulously planned scheme, behind the ruined lives and the stolen land, stood none other than Smith himself. It was likely he who had pushed Jed to dispose of Elijah, all to seize the valuable Thornlands. The conflict escalated to an entirely new, grander scale. This was no longer just about revenge against a brother. It was a battle to restore justice for Sarah, for their family, for all those who had suffered from Smith's treachery. Elijah felt his hatred now directed not only at Jed, but also at the puppet master pulling the strings. He knew he had to stop Smith, so that such evil would never again touch an innocent soul in this land. Driven by the hatred that burned within him with searing intensity and an insatiable thirst for justice, Elijah Thorne, like a shadow, tracked Smith to his very hideout, lost deep within the Rocky Mountains. The air there was thin, and the ancient-looking cliffs seemed silent witnesses to unspoken sins. The shootout was brief and merciless, just a few deafening shots echoing through the ravines. Elijah didn't seek bloodshed. His soul craved justice, not vengeance. But Smith, cornered, with a wild glint in his eyes, gave him no choice, confronting him with a weapon in hand and a fierce determination to fight to his last breath. In Smith's cabin, reeking of gunpowder and stale air, beyond the chaotically scattered belongings, Elijah found not only bags packed tight with gold, but also a stack of incriminating documents. These papers, like a tangled web, revealed a complex network of schemes that stretched across the entire county. Jed, it turned out, was merely one of many whom Sly Smith had deceived, lured into his traps, and used in his dark, vile dealings. Among these pieces of evidence, Elijah stumbled upon a letter from Jed, written several months prior to the events. Every line of this letter was saturated with despair, and in it, Jed revealed his true, heartbreaking motivation. He owed Smith a vast sum, lost in a card game during a moment of desperate foolishness. And Smith, that ruthless predator, had exploited his weakness, threatening their aging mother's life if Jed didn't comply and commit this crime. When Elijah returned from the mountains, he didn't go straight to Sarah. First, he went to their mother. She met him with tears streaming down her wrinkled face and, sobbing, confirmed Jed's story. She recounted how Smith had kept her in constant fear, sending threats of harm to her sons if Jed didn't obey his will. Elijah, despite all the unbearable pain and anger he felt towards his brother for his betrayal, suddenly felt a deep, unexpected compassion. Jed turned out to be not just a scoundrel, but a cornered man, a victim of circumstance and another's cruel, sophisticated malice. With the help of the local sheriff, a wise and just man who had been a longtime loyal friend of the Thorne family, they quickly found Jed, hiding in a neighboring state, exhausted and worn down by guilt. The trial was swift but not cruel. Jed received a sentence for his transgressions, but his sincere testimony against Smith, which helped expose his many other crimes, as well as his obvious deep remorse, helped him receive a much lighter sentence than he might have expected. Sarah finally got her land back, reclaiming what had been taken by deceit. With the help of Elijah and the few loyal friends who had stood by them through the toughest times, he rebuilt the Thorne Ranch, breathing new life and hope into it. They stood on the hill, hand in hand, watching the sun slowly set over their holdings, painting the sky in crimson and golden hues. In their eyes, there was no longer the piercing pain and bitterness of the past, only a serene reconciliation with the trials they had endured and a quiet yet firm hope for the future. Their love, having passed through the crucible of betrayal, deception, and suffering, had only grown stronger, enduring all the harsh trials of the Wild West. This story, one that any witness to those rugged times could tell, became a legend of how, even in the darkest and most ruthless corners of the Wild West, where bullets didn't always find their mark, hearts found their way to justice, redemption, and true love.